I moved around too much.
And we're live. Welcome to Fun This Time podcast. How you doing, Jane?
I'm doing great, Norika. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. We're here, we're talking. Can you tell everybody about what you all the amazing job that you do and everything that you give back to our veterans?
Well, first off, I'm retired Army Reserves,
Go Army.
42 14s, and about 8.5 years of active duty time, and the other 13 were in the reserves. Um, and then I got out and became a county veteran service officer and accredited nationally with five of the organizations like the VFW and DAV and others. And then I spent 12 years almost helping veterans learn about VA benefits and then helping them apply, provide all the paperwork and evidence and all the stuff that VA needed to be able to provide the benefits for our veterans and their widows, which is sometimes a big elephant to push.
Yeah, it's not something that's automatic, right? A lot of people think it is, but it's not. It's something you have to file, and years later you might get it.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true in many cases. But part of that is knowing all the laws and the regulations, 38 Code of Federal Regulation and the M21-1MR, which are the two biggest regulations for and manuals for the VA. And if you know them, then you know how to talk their language and what they want. But if you don't know those really well, it will take you more than one attempt to get it done.
So, what do you recommend that people should do?
Well, first and foremost, never pay to have a claim filed with the VA or an application for any benefit. The initial claim and everything should go through an accredited VSO because as a VSO, I was paid by my county. So I didn't have to charge my veterans or their widows. So there are free, trained, tested, cleared, and people that attend annual training every year to learn all the tricks and trades. And there's literally thousands of us across the country, and we mentor each other. When we learn a new thing or a new rule or regulation comes out, we get on the forum, we discuss it, we break it down, we give each other tips. So go to those people that have that experience. Go to those people that have a Rolodex of telephone numbers inside the VA so they can call and say, hey, I've got another piece of evidence I need to add, or a birth certificate for a new child, or and we can get things done faster. And because it's going in right, and because we have those contacts. I am no longer accredited because I am retired, but I'm happy to provide advice and guidance and links and attachments to all the different benefits and help with people learning where to go closest to them to find those VSO reps.
Yes, I think that's very important. Um, where do you go find those BSO? Because sometimes, you know, it takes some detective work.
It can, because unfortunately, the database is stored on the VA's website, and everything on the VA's website is tricky to find. It's not real simple. They don't have the greatest user friendly system. And so, if you don't have e benefits, you're going to have to dig through things, find the information, and then get set up with e benefits so that you have direct connection to the VA, which doesn't always help either because, again, sometimes the information's hard to find. But I have a link that I send to people and say, to find your local VSO, go here. Then you put in your zip code, your first major city, your county seat, and usually you'll get a list. And you can tell who's employed by the county or the state simply by the fact that they're accredited with more than one organization. If I were a VSO for the VFW organization and paid by the VFW, then I would only be accredited with the VFW.
So I got a question. Um, so once you find your BSO, is there such thing as ratings? Because it took me about 20 years to get my claim done, right? And I went through not just BSO. I went through different others uh persons. So is there like, do you know who can really help? Um, is there a way to check that?
Well, you can, well, first and foremost, when you sit down with a person the first time and interview them, it's just like a doctor or a dentist. If you sit down in a dentist chair and the guy is like no personality and is demanding and doesn't even offer you Novocaine, it's time to look at a new one. Unfortunately, there's VSOs, like in any career field, there's the 10% that graduated in the bottom of their class. And then there's the 10% who really don't give a damn. And the 10% who are just warming a chair until they graduate or until they retire. So you got to pretty much go by your gut feeling. Is this person really trying to help me? Are they explaining things to me on the level that I can understand them and that I can follow through with? Because if they're just going, here's a bunch of forms, go fill them out and come back, that's not a good example of a VSO. So be willing to go to their boss and say, hey, a county veteran or a county or state VSO has a boss, usually somewhat reachable, that you can go, not a good experience. And then you can move on to somebody else.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes it takes
them first.
sometimes it takes to find the right person. Um, because sometimes you claim, you know, you had an injury, and it's not about claiming the injury. It's about knowing how to actually say it, that the VA understand that you say it. And that's what the BSO does for you. They kind of translate it almost like a lawyer talk, right? Because it's not doctor's talk; it's lawyer talk.
Yes. Yeah, you're dealing with federal regulations. So sometimes you have to cite the code that you're actually referring to. You know, what is the additional benefit or what is the exact evidence you need? And of course, most people understand that if you had an injury in service and you went to the TMC or, someone who wrote it in your record that you jumped off the back of the deuce and a half and twisted your knee, that's in a record. But if you're on a convoy and you're halfway between posts and it's going to be a day and a half before you get back to your base or your camp, you may or may not get it in the official record. Your actual field medic may be the one that says, oh, put some ice on it and take some ibuprofen. And that's all he does. He never puts it in the record.
Yeah,
So that's
the
what you do.
standard.
Pardon?
That's pretty much the standard for any injury in the military. Get some ibuprofen, cool it off, and go wrong again tomorrow. There's no need to go to the doctors. You'll be fine. Just walk off the pain, and you'll be fine, right?
Yeah, I did that one time in the middle of the night. We had to exit our vehicles quickly, and I jumped into a ditch and didn't realize how deep it was. And I ended up landing on the other side and hyperextending both ankles. And afterwards, got back in the vehicle, just grabbed the 100-mile-an-hour tape and wrapped over my socks, put my boots back on. 2 days later, cut my socks off, and that's an interesting shade of purple.
I believe it. I believe it. No, no military related, right? Just
But the
because it
thing of it
wasn't right.
is, the VA regulations allow you to use buddy statements. the person that handed you the 100-mile-an-hour tape to wrap your ankles, the guy whose ibuprofen you ate for the next 2 days. So those are witnesses. And guy that saw you cut your socks off and your ankles were purple. That's a witness that can say, I was there with this person when this event happened, or who saw you afterwards and said, I saw the purple ankles. I heard the story from other people. It's not like she went home for the weekend while we were deployed. So they can attest to your injury being during service. And that's just as good as a TMC medical record.
And there's actually a site where you lose touch for your, and I will put it on the links. You lose touch with your old bodies because you move so many PCA times, and we're all over the world. There's actually a site where you can go find people from your old unit and kind of reconnect. And there's a whole bunch of Facebook groups about it too. So that might be another way to connect with your old buddies. You need that. You need to get that far.
Yes. It's amazing what you can do with the internet. I had a Korean War veteran, and he had been shot, and they had taken him to a field hospital, and he was there. His unit moved out, and a couple days later, the village was overrun in the field hospital, and it was blown apart, and he was stuck in the frozen rubble in winter in Korea. And he was there for a day and a half before a group of Marines came in. And those Marines dug him out. They took him with their unit. They cleaned him up, warmed him up because he had frostbite in his feet and his hands, and then got him back to his unit. So he had no medical records of being shot or of being frostbitten. So he came in. He just wanted to know if he would use the VA healthcare, would they give him a scooter, because his frostbite was now affecting the nerves above his knees. So he was at the point where he was using 2 4-pointed canes to walk with. And I said, well, what's the story about your ability to ambulate? And he told me, and I went, okay, we're going to file a claim, and it's going to be tough because we got to find a witness, but we will. And he was like, well, I don't care as long as I can get my scooter. He goes, the other stuff would be great, but I'm not going to count on it. And so I got him into the VA healthcare. Yes, he got his scooter. But a few months later, I had posted, and I got an answer for a call from a veteran, a Marine, who said, I think I'm one of the ones you're looking for, because I remember the events that you described. And I think the guy's name was, and I went, yep, you're the guy. So I actually hooked him up with my veteran because I had permission to give his number out. And sure enough, my guy called me a few hours later crying because he'd finally gotten to thank one of the guys that had saved his life. So my guy and I had our good. I got the statements from him, and he went from never having been in the VA to 100% service-connected disabled because he couldn't walk anymore.
That's awesome. Thank you for doing that. Because that makes a difference. That makes a difference in people's life.
Yeah. Yeah, when he got his back paycheck, he called me up and he goes, oh, this is wonderful. I'll put some of this in my savings. I'll catch up on my bills and all this stuff. And I just went, okay, now from here forward, you're going to get that $3,000 a month. And he goes, what 3,000? So I said, from here forward, you're going to get $3,000 a month. I said, and when it gets to the point that you can't take care of yourself anymore, the VA is going to provide you free nursing home care. And he just started crying on me again. So, because he was so sure he was going to lose everything to the costs.
Yeah. And that's a shame. Sometimes it's not, you know, there's a lot of resources, there's a lot of benefits out there, But
Oh
there's a
yeah.
lack of awareness. It's a huge lack of awareness because
Yep.
there's no actual roadmap that makes sense.
There are almost 20 million veterans. Now, in 1976, the year before I graduated high school, just after Vietnam, there was 32 million. And most of those guys were wartime because of Korea and World War II and everything. And at that point, World War I guys were still living. And I think even some Spanish War guys were. But um, now there's only 20. But 9 million of them are the Vietnam and older. And they don't do FaceTime, they don't do Zoom meetings, they don't do the internet. And our homeless guys sure don't do the internet. And anybody that doesn't have the internet because where they live, I mean, I go over to my sister's house and about half of the trip, I have no signal as far as cell phone goes. So technology is not always the answer. And yet the only place to find VA information other than a VSO is on the internet.
And and the thing is, once that veteran pass away, there's no benefits to be had, right?
Depends. If you're a veteran and your spouse and or children, dependent children, those still in school and or under the age of 18 or under the age of 26, depending if they're in school like college or whatever, and you're helping them and they're single and they're not financially secure, or if they're an adult special needs child. If that child was handicapped before their 18th birthday, and you're still helping support them, they're going to be your dependent the rest of your life. So that qualifies. If a veteran dies of something related to service, like our young guys and the 9 new cancers from the burn pits, the VA is now recognizing 9 respiratory cancers and other diseases of the respiratory system. So if you're a veteran out there and you were exposed to burn pits, you need to get with your VSO and file your claim if you're having any kind of breathing problems, because it may not be on the list today, but who knows, maybe next year it will be. If you're a Vietnam guy, there's 38 cancers related to Agent Orange. You may have been stationed in Thailand on an Air Force base where you were exposed, or you may have been on the DMZ in Korea for a few years during that time and exposed to Agent Orange. There's 38 cancers and a whole bunch of other diseases that are related to Agent Orange. And of course, then you talk about environmental things like frostbite and malaria, and things like this. So depending on where you're stationed, if you're a Korean War guy, were you exposed to any chemicals like jet fuels and things like that? Do you have those presumptive illnesses? Or are you a veteran with ALS? ALS is presumptive to all of us. Statistically, it's been proven that as veterans, we are twice as likely to develop it. Why? I don't think there's a solid enough reason for them to say it, but they do know that statistically, twice as many, or nearly twice as many veterans get it as the general public. So if you are a veteran with ALS or the widow of a veteran with ALS, you are entitled to benefits. Please go see your CVSO or your VSO rep.
And also, so if you're the child of a veteran, that actually gets 100%, there's actually benefits for the children as well.
Yes. While the children are under 26 and still single, if that veteran's 100%, there's education benefits. They will receive a stipend, they will have free tuition, you know, and later on, if that child is assisting mom or dad with service related needs like aid and attendance, then there's a stipend that can be paid to them for taking care of that 100% veteran. If that veteran needs care on the personal level, just if they're not able to step in and out of the bathtub safely, or they wear a prosthetic and it makes it difficult for them to dress themselves, or they have back injuries or something like that, or have skin issues on their back and they need somebody to help put their medication on. Those are all what qualify as aid and attendance. And if you're doing those kind of services for a veteran, that veteran should be able to apply for a stipend and also for the aid and attendance benefit. So don't short yourself by not knowing what's available. Maybe today your veteran isn't badly injured, but he has some injuries. But 20 years from now, those injuries might really be impacting their lives and they might be needing assistance. Know what's coming and know what you're eligible for down the road.
Yeah, we kind of need to get a bachelor on VA benefits because uh, we need it. Uh, you know, things show up eventually.
Yes, yes. And things are being added to the presumptive list all the time. A veteran might have died from ischemic heart disease that was Vietnam, and he might have died 10 years ago. Well, it hasn't been 10 years since they put it on the list. So if you're that widow, you may be eligible for that, what they call DIC, dependent indemnity compensation. But a lot of VSOs, they refer to it as DIC, and people go, what's that? And I just say, well, that's death compensation. That's compensation because the death of the veteran was due to or contributed to. It may not have been the main cause, but he couldn't survive the pneumonia because he had service-connected type 2 diabetes that prevented him from having good body circulation, neuropathy. And so that's contributed. It wouldn't have happened this quickly or this easily if it hadn't been for the service stuff. And that widow is entitled to benefits. And they shouldn't be paying for care for that veteran. That should come through the VA.
What can you tell us about? And sorry to keep asking you a question, but you're a wealth of information. Uh, what can you tell us about those pesky burial benefits that are like kind of like a mystery to get any information out of that?
Yeah. On the memorial side of the VA can provide free plots in a veteran cemetery. If that veteran is service connected for anything, even just service connected for a little bit of hearing loss, there's a funeral stipend that can help a little bit with the cost of the funeral. There's a free headstone. There's free bronze markers if you already have your headstone, but you want a symbol, an emblem on the side of the stone that says Air Force veteran. Or if you want the entire big plaque with their name, the branch of service, and all that stuff on it, that's free. The big bronze plaque is over $800. And I have actually run into one cemetery that was charging the widows for the free bronze plaque. They weren't getting it from VA. They were paying for an actual outside replica. But it's just the idea that instead of saying to the widow, oh, you can go down to the VA office, your veteran service office, sign a form, and they'll send it to the cemetery. Now, you may have to pay the mounting fee, which those little medallions that they have now are super glued on. So they drill one little hole and then they super glue the post and they put it in and it just stays there. So again, when it comes to veteran services, don't pay for something until you've talked to a VSO to make sure that it's legitimately your cost. We honor our guys. I've had situations where we had a veteran pass in our county and he was a bit of a hermit. And I wish I'd known him and I wish he'd come into my office because we probably would have gotten him service connected for PTSD. But when he passed, we couldn't find any family. So I called around to the veteran organizations and they all chipped in and we took care of getting him cremated. And then we mailed him over to our state veterans cemetery. And they freely placed him and they got his headstone and everything else and took care of his remains in a very honorable way. And they even sent us a letter saying we are going to place him on this date at this time if anyone would like to come and see the ceremony.
Yeah.
So, and the flag and everything, the VA provides all that. We even in my office we used to read through the obituaries, and if there was any indication that the person was a veteran, we would send off to get a presidential memorial certificate thanking the family for his service. And we would, check with them to make sure that there wasn't a remaining, say, surviving spouse that might be entitled to benefits or child. There's even situations right now with a law called NEMR. NEMR is a court ruling. So if a veteran died of something related to Agent Orange and had previously filed a claim for something that was not on the list at the time, but now is on that list, the VA owes him that back pay. So in order to balance the books, the remaining family is entitled to that benefit. One of the girls called me one day and said, I got a call. This guy said he was from the VA and he knew all this information about my dad. And I just didn't believe him. So I hung up. And I said, well, let's check with the VA. And I did. And sure enough, he had filed a claim for one of the conditions that had gone on the list. And because her name and social security number was in his file, they were able to locate her. And they said, well, we're trying to find your mother. And she said, well, my mother is deceased. And he said, okay, are there any other siblings? And there was 2 brothers. So the money they owed dad, they split it 3 ways and gave it to each child. And these children were in their 40s. So,
But I'm sure it made a difference.
yeah, so you never know. I always told my veterans, come see me every 5 years, even if just to stop in the office for a few minutes and let me know you're okay. If you've moved, if your phone number's changed or anything like that, and let me and or someone in the office update you, just in case.
I think I'm just gonna fly to your office.
I'm sorry?
I think I'm just gonna fly to your office every 5 years.
Well, I'm no longer in that office, but I can gladly give you Tara's telephone number. No, she'll kill me. She's already busy enough.
But I have other questions. You still have some time.
Certainly.
Um, Travel benefits. You know, if most veterans I know, they get kind of restless. They love to travel. They've been moving 3, 5 years on. What is out there? What are those benefits that you can use to travel? And
Well, there's different sets of benefits. On the VA side of the house, if you're a veteran and you're in the VA healthcare system and you are in a car accident and you go to the ambulance takes you to the nearest hospital and you get treated in the emergency room. If you need further ongoing care and you're stable and can be transported to the nearest VA hospital, the VA will take care of all those bills and they will take care of transporting you if they have a bed available. If not, you'll remain in the other hospital until the VA either can transport you or the hospital releases you. Now, the VA will cover everything as long as they don't have a bed available or they can't transfer you because maybe you're not stable. If at that point you say, that's okay, I'm only going to do one more night, I'll stay in the local hospital, then that you are becoming responsible for that additional night. The biggest thing and most important thing is if you have to be in the VA healthcare. You have to have been seen by a VA doctor at your local clinic or whatever within the last 18 months. And once you get to that emergency room, you or someone from the staff or your family needs to contact the VA within 72 hours. If you wait till the fourth day, the VA is going to say you didn't reach us in the 72 hours. But if you go to the emergency room, they give you your stitches or whatever, and you go home, well, then you call the VA and say, I've just come home from the hospital. I was in the emergency room for a couple hours while they stitched up my leg or whatever. Then the VA will cover it. On the travel side of the house, the fun stuff, of course, if you're a military retiree, you have the HOPS or Military Air Command, Space Aid Travel available to you. But now, as a veteran, if you are 100% service connected disabled, you also can use the space available. And you can use any other military retiree benefits, such as getting an ID card and going on post and going to the PX and commissary, which unfortunately isn't as good a deal as it used to be. But you have those options. You can use that morale and welfare, that less costly hotel that's on base in definitely a much safer neighborhood. So look into those adventures.
Well, I tell you, for personal experience, I took a road trip and I made a point to stop on every single base that was on my way because gas was a lot cheaper. So I saved a couple bucks on that. Hotels were a lot cheaper, you know, and I had an ID card. I made a point to have an ID card because it gave me access to all of that. And it was actually, I was traveling as a single woman, and it can be unsafe sometimes. But you go to a military base, there's a 24-hour security, right?
Yeah, a lot less risk of having your car broken into or harassed by a local or anything like that. You can walk over, to the bowling alley or whatever and not feel like it's a risk. And of course, everything on post generally costs a little bit less, especially the lodging.
Yeah, it might take some planning, but it can be done, and it's a handy tool to have, another resource. And what would you tell to those that feel they shouldn't claim their benefits because all the veterans need it more?
That's I hear that a lot. Unfortunately, too often when I hear that from a veteran, then I would start asking things like, when did you serve? Where did you serve? When you were in service, did anything happen where you might have been injured and now it's giving you trouble? Now, when I came out, my hearing was a little bit different, but now I'm looking at those $5,000 hearing aids. Why should you pay for $5,000 hearing aids when your service is what exposed you to those jet engines, or you were a tanker, or you were a generator repairman and spent days, if not hours, working on generators and things like that, and that hearing loss was noted on your entrance exam, but when you got out, your hearing had changed, even if it was just a tiny bit. That's the signs of that initial damage. Or if your medical records show that you complained about tinnitus when you had your hearing test in service and things like that. Why should you pay for $5,000 hearing aids?
Why should you take it away from your family?
Yeah, that happens to all of us.
So, yeah, what
Yeah. And when and where you serve can be so important because of things like the toxic water on Camp Lejeune. from 1953 to 1987, there was dry cleaning fluid in the wells. So not only are the veterans have a list of presumptive illnesses, but so do their family members that were there, the children that were conceived there. Your children and or spouse and or ex-wife may be entitled, or ex-husband in my case would be. I don't have an ex-husband, but yet. So um, if they had been there and we'd been stationed there and they'd been on post, they might be ill because of that water exposure. There's free health care for them for those conditions.
Yeah, we need to we need to look at the whole picture. If we did the time, however short or however long, that case, you might have done it because that's what you feel that you needed to do. But the same way that you had responsibilities for the military had responsibility for what your job required.
Yes. And you stepped up when other people wouldn't. I mean, guys will say, well, I was drafted. You know what? You didn't go to Canada. You could have run. You could have gone to live in Mexico. But instead, you did I want to say the honorable thing. You stepped into those boots, you left everything that was familiar, and you went off and did a job that most people can't or won't do. So you've earned these rights, and your spouse and children have earned those benefits because of the quality of life that may have been taken away from you through illness or injury, the employment that you may have missed out on because of these things.
Yeah,
Please
they might have to
carry
have
your
they might have to have moved as many times as you did, right? And they have to go through kind of all the hardships and you getting deployed and coming back and being grumpy for whatever trauma you suffer and feel abandoned if you didn't go through 3 or 4 divorces along the way.
yeah. And everybody in service, you don't have to go to a combat zone to deal with trauma.
No.
Um, for me, one of the hardest things I ever did in service emotionally was I was activated for Hurricane Hugo and San Francisco earthquake. Hurricane Hugo, we were the main communications point because normally South Carolina was their communications point to the US as far as support and the military and things like that. And I was at a communication site outside of Washington, D.C. Well, South Carolina got hit by the tornado or hurricane, I guess it was, and it wiped out their station. All of a sudden, the guy, we were listening in on their radios, and you hear him screaming and cussing, and the roof's gone, I'm out of here. So he had to shut down, of course. And we took over and we did a lot of the emergency support, working with the Navy, working with the Red Cross and everything else, getting things to these people. And we had a couple death calls. A brother was calling his other brother in the US who was on business and had to tell him that his daughter had been killed in the storm. But the guy in the US knew there was something wrong. He didn't want to hear it. So he kept changing the subject. And I'm sitting there with a set of headphones on and doing the push to talk. Okay, when you're done saying what you're saying, say over, and then I'll push the button so he can talk, and back and forth, back and forth. And finally, the guy on the other end just broke out crying and screaming, and he's just, shut up, I have to tell you this. And I'm just sitting there with tears running down my face because I knew what was coming was bad too. So service and trauma doesn't always necessarily mean combat. So, and no matter what, if you're working with jet fuel, and one of my guys had multiple times he'd gotten jet fuel all over his boots and everything, and he had nerve damage in his feet because of it. Again, you don't have to be in combat to be injured.
You don't have to. You don't have to go to war to get injured. Especially, it's not exclusive to women. Um, when you talk about sexual violence or all the kinds of violence, that it leaves as many sequels as going through war, right?
Yep. Yeah, trauma can be verbal abuse repeatedly. It can be, God forbid, physical abuse. And sexual trauma is definitely still a problem, not only in our society, but in our military. It's something nobody's proud of, but it's something we still have to report because you have to protect the next person, the next victim. So if you've been assaulted physically, verbally, sexually, you need to let that out. You can't start to begin to fully heal. So this is a good place. This is a safe space. Go to the VA, get into counseling, get your benefits owed. So in case, because any kind of trauma, any form of PTSD, any form of mental health, when you first rip off the bandage, it's going to hurt worse, and it's going to possibly take you away from work for a while and things like that. Have your benefits in place so that you can be supported emotionally as well as financially.
I completely agree. I think any kind of trauma, any kind of service that you did, um, like anything in life, it comes with good and bad. I have very good memories of the military service. I have some bad memories. I'm sure you do as well, because it wasn't all roses, right? Nah. So if the benefits are there just because you don't use it doesn't mean that it goes to the next person. It means that it might go to waste.
Yes. And that's another thing that, everybody talks about the VA and they think, okay, I have to go in the VA and they're going to want to put me on drugs and blah, blah, blah. Granted, sometimes medication is needed because, after all, if your life is depressed, over anxious, argumentative, happy as a lark, and back and forth, you're not really in control. So you need to get to the middle of the road. And that's what those medications might be for. But then again, they don't have to be a lifetime commitment. I've been on medication and back off medication and then found myself I had to take an early retirement because of some health issues, part of it being service connected, part of it not. And I went back to the medication for a little while because I felt like I'd lost my identity. I'd left service suddenly due to injuries and lost my identity then. And so sometimes that medication is just that temporary, get you balanced back in the middle of the road where you can see everything. And then other times, it's just a safe place to go and talk to somebody. There's a wonderful group of small clinics, I guess I'll call them. The VA supports what are called vet centers. They're not directly part of the VA healthcare system, but they are a mental health care clinics that are all across the United States. And they are staffed by combat veterans. They are staffed by other veterans that have been through trauma inside the military, be it military sexual trauma, be it combat. They are counselors, they are mentors, but they're not shrinks. They can't prescribe medication. They're just a place to go and offload some of that garbage that's hanging around. Now, that's not to say that you may go and visit with them a half a dozen times and they say, you know what, you're doing better, but you still might need medication. And then they're going to recommend that you go and see the doctor inside the VA hospital or healthcare system and get that medication. But the ability to go and see those counselors outside of the healthcare system is often the starting point for a lot of guys, because they don't want the stigma of mental health. They don't want, I'm not going to take drugs. I don't want to go see those people. Well, no, go see the guys that have been through it, that have been there, done that, and gotten at least more solid in their life. Get that baggage, take it with you, and you'll find that a lot of times they'll offer to hold it for you.
Yes. And
So it's more. And states have programs. Here in Wisconsin, we have actual vouchers. So if we have a veteran walk into our office and we have the believe that he needs to get in and see a counselor right away, we can call the state and they can voucher so that he can go to a local mental health center and get immediate counseling as soon as we can get him in. And it might be a month before they can get into the VA. But we can get him, or he can go to the emergency room before we can get him into the VA healthcare system and see someone there, and the state will voucher that. So look and see what you got in your area.
and it's also important to look at what works for you, right? So there's a thousands different alternative treatments, therapy treatments. So you don't have to be just drugs. Um, sometimes nothing against drugs. Sometimes you need to take the drugs for whatever illness, but there's other alternatives that can help you deal with the pain or whatever trauma you're suffering as well, and use a combination of stuff as well, right?
Yes. The VA is part of the National Institute of Health research, and they also have research projects going all across the United States. There's a research project for traumatic brain injury. So if we have a veteran that's got a traumatic brain injury, we can recommend that they talk to their social worker at the clinic, who has to go through a process of screening them and everything. And if they do get chosen as a candidate to participate, they'll actually fly them to the research where the research is being done, so they can go through all these tests, so they can talk to the doctors about what treatment program might work better for them and things like that. There's a prostate research one. So prostate cancer victims can offer to be part of their research program. One of my guys, when his cancer came back for the third time, he did not want to take, trying to think of the medication. It's a hormone therapy. It can be very tough on some people. So he wanted to be part of the research of these radiated seeds that they would place inside him. And so they flew him out there once a month. He'd get the treatment. He'd be sick as a dog for 2 or 3 days, and then they'd fly him home. But his wife went with him because on the way home, he was so wobbly, and the VA paid for that. So if you're dealing with VA, there's so much modern day research, from acupuncture, um, recognition therapy, where they deal with seeing some, images and stuff like that for mental health treatment. There is a cannabis study. There's other studies inside the VA, and you're not going to get that treatment like a cannabis treatment in a state like Wisconsin, where it's illegal for marijuana. But they may decide, this is going to be the best treatment for him for PTSD, and make him a candidate to go to where it's being researched. So you have opportunities in some of the most modern medical care.
And it goes to, how do you find out about all these studies? You have to go check your WISIA VSO.
The VSOs aren't always exactly up to date on all the different researches, but the social workers inside the VA are. So they know when there's a research project being that, because they put so many people in a year. So they'll know when there's a need for patients in the studies, what the requirements are to be in the study. And if you're having problems, say, with your doctor, you just don't feel like he's being open to you as far as treatments go, or perhaps his personality and yours conflict directly, the social worker is the person that's going to work with you. Or if you move and you need to go into a new clinic, the social worker is the best person to go see the first time, because they're going to sit down with you and say, okay, in this clinic, we have these services, but you'll have to drive. I used to have to drive to Milwaukee for a hearing test. Well, then they built the new clinic. So now I just go 45 minutes instead of almost 2 hours. So they're the ones that are up to date on all this stuff. They get all the alerts.
Yeah, as you have to do your research, right? And depending on the VA that you go and the practitioner that you find, you might get the information on that. So you still have to do your homework. You cannot rely on one source of information alone. Do you have a minute to answer a couple of questions? We got several comments. Dr. Alex in Cash in LinkedIn saying this is a very important topic. So we agree. Janet Matlock, uh, she's saying that it took her over 30 years to find someone to listen and assist her. And she also is surprised that 100% disabled veteran children receive free tuition. So she's asking, is that true?
Yes. The big thing there is when you get your 100%, or when you get individual unemployability, which is that you have the right to receive the benefit of being 100%, i.e., a case of an ischemic heart disease. The veteran has signs of heart problems in service, gets service connected, now has a lot of blockages, or a lot of, or God forbid, a heart attack. And the VA says, you're not going to be able to maintain gainful employment, work 40 hours a week, have a certain level of income without missing time for doctor's appointments or over stressing your heart to the point where, if you have 60% heart failure, most employers aren't going to look twice at you. So the VA has a thing called individual unemployability, which says your heart is at 60%, but we're going to pay you at 100%. And when those things become permanent and total, then the family has insurance through CHAMP VA, and they have Chapter 35, which is the GI Bill for the dependents. So children up to the age of 26 who are single and maintain school will receive that. If they're in full time, they receive the full benefits plus the full stipend. If they're doing part time, they get a prorated stipend. So, yeah. And some states have even better programs. In the state of Wisconsin, a veteran rated 30%, children under the age of 26, still in school, can receive free tuition at any state university if the veteran is rated 30% or greater. And the spouse, say your kids are 16 and 14 and 12, she has till 10 years after, or he has till 10 years after the youngest child turns 18. So here in the state of Wisconsin, we basically have 4 years of free education at any state university or state tech school. Other states will have just a stipend every quarter toward books or things like that. So check out what's there.
What
And
is
it doesn't mean college. Sometimes it's tech school or just learning how to drive a bulldozer.
so? Where should they go as this? Call the GI Bill. hotline, go to the school, the local school. How did they find out? Somebody's asking about Texas. Um, I asked about Florida. Um, I got two children going to college soon, hopefully.
Yes. You want to call your county government first. Then, if they don't have county veterans offices, then call your state, either your state's Department of Veterans Affairs or state military affairs office. They may have regional ones. And again, because they're employed, those people don't charge. And because they're accredited, they have to go through the training every year. And they have access to the computer system of the VA, which allows them to look in and say, oh, well, that doctor's exam wasn't a very good exam. We filed a claim for a bad knee and the doctor didn't even look for range of motion. Obviously, they're not going to be able to rate, so you want a new exam. So that's real helpful to have that. Or they can call up and say, my guy just got a diagnosis of cancer. Any terminal illness or bills that are past due are as grounds to request an expedite, that your file be pulled out of the middle of the stack and put on top. Again, veterans don't know that can happen. And all too often, a veteran will get a bad diagnosis and he may even pass before his claim gets done. Get that done. Know that VSO. They're the ones that are going to see your obituary in the newspaper, and they're going to reach out to your family and say, come on in, let's sit down and talk and see if there's something you should be receiving now.
Yeah, I know it took me 20 years.
Yep. Other big program in the VA that veterans don't know about is called a Wartime Veterans and Surviving Spouses Pension. In 11 and a half years as a CVSO, only one person had ever heard of it. Of the thousands of veterans that I met, and I did a lot of public events, so I met lots of veterans. But it's really the basis. Most people think of the widow's pension for, the beginning of veterans benefits, when the veteran was killed on the battlefield and the widow at home received a pension. Well, it's kind of like that, but much more expanded. If a veteran is over 65, they're considered to be outside of the full-time working world. So in this case, a lot of folks are on Social Security. They may have a small pension. Their spouse may be on Social Security, and now they're on this fixed income. And then all of a sudden, their spouse or they start suffering with illnesses where they're paying for expensive drugs, where they're paying for in-home care, they're paying for their Medicare premium, their health insurance premiums for the supplement. And now all of a sudden their income is being sucked away. Well, the VA has a pension program that can help with that. Or in the case of our wartime veterans under 65, I had a young man that had only been home from deployment for a year, and we'd put him in the VA healthcare system. He was on a motorcycle. A guy pulled out of a driveway, hit my guy, and he ended up in the local hospital. We called the VA. They hooked up with the hospital. He was in our local hospital for almost 2 months before he was stable enough to go down to the local VA hospital, which happened to have one of the best spinal centers in the country. And he also had an extreme head injury, but he was wearing a helmet. But he stayed there for 6 months learning how to walk again. And he didn't have a penny of medical bills. But when he came home, he was never going back to the working world. So he didn't qualify for Social Security disability. He didn't have enough working quarters in his work history. So he qualified for SSI, Supplemental Security Income, which is, at that time, was about $850 a month. Well, it's obvious nobody's going to live on $850 a month. But because he was a wartime veteran, he received $950 a month additional through the VA, through the wartime pension as a single veteran. So his family was able to help him find a small apartment on the same street, in fact, on the same block, so that his mom could transport him back and forth to doctor visits and do things like that for him. But that gave him the quality and sense of independence that that young man deserved, even though he wasn't going to be able to go work. So the wartime pension takes into account your full household income, subtracts off all the medical expenses, medical insurance premiums, and everything else for both yourself and your spouse if you're married, and then says, what's leftover income, the living income? What are you living off of? Oh, that's below poverty. We're going to supplement your income back up and get you over poverty. For a veteran, it will be 130% of poverty. For a surviving spouse of a wartime veteran, it would be the poverty level. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but one more bag of groceries a month sometimes is a great deal. And other times, if you're looking at a cost of assisted living and you're going to live in the community and your spouse is going to be the one going into the assisted living, that $2,400 a month or more is going to help offset how quickly your life savings are disappearing. Now, granted, the VA has to have a cap on savings. After all, if somebody has $1 million in the bank, they don't need the VA pension to help them at this point. But if those liquefiable assets, such as bank accounts, IRAs, things like that, all add up to less than $140,000 when combined with your living income, then the VA will step in and start providing that income, that supplemental income. So you can see where if you're trying to live as a couple off of $2,000, you're going to probably struggle between insurances and everything else. So the VA can provide that couple $100 a month so that it makes it a little easier. Maybe now you're only taking $100 out of your savings instead of $300 out of your savings each month. So it'll last a little longer.
Yeah. Nowadays, that means the difference on filling up your gas tank.
Yeah. Yeah. So don't short yourself. Don't let your life savings that you work so hard be consumed. People think of programs like Medicaid. Well, Medicaid has two conditions. One, if you're single, you're going to be down to $2,000 and then you're going to get Medicaid. Or you're going to have a I can't think of the type of account, but basically you're allowed to set aside so much money, but it goes into an account that when you pass, the state gets. And then they'll be helping you. And in some states, they will financially, here in our state, they do financially separate a spouse that lives in the community and the spouse that's in, say, assisted living or is in getting in-home care. So the spouse that's staying in the community is allowed to maintain a savings account, but is generally, many years ago when I was still CVSO, it was like 60,000. Well, unfortunately, in today's world, that 60,000 isn't going to last that long when you pass. So, yeah, don't do that. The VA will step in well ahead of any of those programs. So, if you're a wartime veteran or a surviving spouse of a wartime veteran, the person that was married to that veteran on the day they died, then you should go and find out about these benefits.
And I have a couple more comments. I know Carrie Murray from Facebook. She's saying, just about everywhere you can call VA and ask for an MST coordinator. That's a good comment. She agreed with you. And there's so many things. There's so many things that we can pick apart on how many issues the military lifestyles has, and how many resources and how much stuff that we don't know that we don't even qualify for, um, or that nobody let us know because it can be different causes. Maybe you don't have a permanent address anymore. Maybe um, you have some kind of mental problem and you never fill out the paperwork, so you never went through um, the proper VA hospital and you didn't get cut. Or maybe you're homeless, or maybe you live overseas. What is the best, like, if somebody's in the, what is the best source to find, to start finding out if there's something that you're really desperate, and we don't want to wait until we're desperate, but that's how you end up with people dying, right? We need to do our research ahead of time, and we need to prepare not only ourselves but our families, because there's a huge lack of awareness. They sometimes look at it like we're this mysterious being that just came back after so many years of service. um how do you prepare them?
Well, first and foremost, know your VSO rep, whether it's your county, state, or organizational one. Know that person because they have those magic Rolodexes with all the phone numbers. But also, if you are on LinkedIn, get a hold of me. I will happily send you the links and attachments to a lot of the benefits we just talked about. And then there's also, if you are in crisis, the VA has a suicide hotline, which is actually the national suicide hotline. So it's not just for veterans, it is for all persons that are dealing with mental health situations. It's 800 273 8255. So if you're dealing with a lot of emotional stuff and you need somebody to talk to, you need somebody that has the mental health resources in your area, call that number. If you are a veteran, you're going to be recommended that you press number 1. That number is going to send you to someone who speaks militaries and also is going to be focused on the VA benefits and the VA, like vet centers and all the other things. So they'll help you find those local benefits, those local resources. In general, though, for all the other veterans resources, your CVSO, VSO rep, of course, is a good resource, but there's also organizations like Military One Source, Vets to Industry. On their websites, they have catalogs of entire alphabet that you can look up if you're looking for information on local cemeteries, veteran cemeteries in your state, or if you're looking for space A information, or if you're, so both of those and a whole bunch more have great pages that you can go to and find a lot of these resources, like they'll give you the websites for all sorts of places, like there's a wonderful coffee company I'm trying to think of, Black Rifle Coffee. They're there. And they also have a lot of the organizations like the VFW, American Legion, all that stuff. If you're in a situation where, say, you were employed and then you got hurt either on the job or in an accident or whatever, and now you're not working and you're going to be getting behind on bills, a lot of these organizations have temporary programs where you can apply for small grants. Our county veterans office, we had a small relief fund that people contributed to. So we could cover maybe a month's rent for a family. And then I would get a hold of the Goodwill or the St. Vincent de Paul, And then I'd get a hold of the VFW and then the American Legion guys, and maybe the American Legion and the VFW Post could each contribute half a month. And so we could cover a couple months of rent, a couple months of utility bills. We could get veterans hooked up with Heat for Heroes, which is another nonprofit organization that helps with cost of energy to heat your house and things like that. So again, starting with your local level and then branching out onto the more national level with organizations like Military One Source and Vets to Industry and several other multiple large nonprofits, they're going to get you things that you can do. I happen to be a member of the Academy of United States Veterans, AUSV, and they do a lot of small helps for families and stuff like that. So, and sometimes they're even able to do large impact things when there's an extreme need. We're
Yeah,
out here. Just find us.
yeah. I think whatever issue you're dealing with, you need to reach out and find out what is the thing that you need.
Yes. Information is probably the hardest thing because the VA doesn't advertise. And even though VSOs like myself, when we would go to our national conferences, the Undersecretary for Veterans Benefits Administration, would come to our office, our conference, and we would get on the microphone and say, "Why aren't you on national radio, national TV?" Well, you and I both know the reason is they can't handle the workload they have. So instead, less than half of our veterans use VA healthcare. Less than half of our veterans receive benefits. Yet half of our veterans are over 65. Too many of them are living below poverty because of their medical expenses and because they don't use the VA healthcare. And too many widows, it's probably close to 8 million widows out there. Just over 500,000 of them receive VA benefits. But I'm guessing that probably close to 4 million of them would be eligible either through DIC, or death compensation, or pension because they're living on one Social Security check. So help us spread the word. If you are in national TV or radio, I have all the information. I'm happy to give it to you if you can help me get it on to TV.
I believe so. I think it's important. I think information is power. You need to educate yourself. That's your responsibility. And you need to make sure that your family is educated and also verify the source of where you're getting that information from. Right now, there's so much information all over, but sometimes not the right one. So that's why you need to verify your sources.
Our local communities, our local counties, our states, they have the ability to help you get that right information. Go ask. And as a county veteran service officer, I often had guys that came into my office and said, I'm doing okay, but my wife, the non veteran, is having these health issues or something like that. And I could say, okay, I can't help you. I've already gotten you into VA healthcare and you don't have any injuries or illnesses, and your income is okay as far as not hitting the pension or your peacetime. But if you go downstairs to the Department of Human Services, they might be able to put you on food stamps, or they might be able to get you a heat voucher, or, so we often married up.
Yeah, it's amazing. Um, so people are asking, how can they reach you? How they can contact you? because you have been a vault of information. I don't think I have not anybody else before that had so much to share in such a relevant way. So how can they reach you?
That is my favorite place to be. So, Jane Babcock, just like it says right there, Veterans Benefits Educator. And find me, reach out to me. Um,
Can
if
you
you're not paying for the premium and you can't do the reach out for some reason, then find a comment where I've made a comment on somebody's post and reply to it and just say, Jane, I need your information. I'll reach out to you. I do one-on-one phone calls to help people understand. I send them all the tools and stuff that they need to figure out, is my dad eligible for pension? Did my mom, was she stationed on this post where she might have been exposed to chemicals? And if so, is her present cancer or illness related to it, the presumptive list? And I'll help you get all the information you need to get you started, and I'll get you connected with your local who will help you do all the paperwork and stuff.
can you repeat that information again where they can find you?
LinkedIn, Jane Babcock, Veterans Benefits Educator. I'll send you all the information you need as far as tools and resources I use. They're all free. They're all online and or attachments of things I've created. And then you can get a hold of me again and we can talk one-on-one if we need to. If you have a group, I do virtual classes, much like we're doing right here, only I can do, Q&A with the people in your group and stuff like that. So I'm here. I want to share. The more of us who know, the less we risk leaving our heroes living below poverty or dying from things that wipe out their life savings that are due to their service.
Yeah, you need to reach out. You're listening to this, you have no excuse. You need to reach out.
And once you get that information, I believe in exponential growth. If I give it to you, you have to give it to two more people who then have to each give it to two more people. And soon enough, we'll have educated the family well enough. 65% of military service members come from a family who had prior service people in it. So we can reach them all eventually if we just work at it for a little while.
Yes, definitely. Um, and I have one last question. What do you say to those people that say that the transition issue has been solved?
When you say transition issue, what do you mean?
The military transition.
Well, unfortunately, military transition it's great because when I was injured in 2003 and basically, here, sign here, you're in the retired reserves. And that was my transition, no mention of VA. So it's greatly improved from what it used to be, but they're looking at the young adult that's going to be in the age of 22 to 40 something. And they're not thinking pension. They're not thinking, oh, he's going to come down with ALS 8 years from now. They're not thinking, oh, he's going to eventually develop cancer from his job in service. So they're not telling you about those benefits. They're only talking to you about what's today. Oh, you have a bad knee? This is how you file a claim. Now that bad knee has gotten worse to the point where you've been walking badly and ambulating for 12 years on a bad knee, and now your hip is all messed up because of your knee. They're not going to talk about 12 years after service. They're just talking about today. So they don't have the time to go through the whole process. You and I just spent an hour talking about this, and we covered a lot of information, but we covered it at the sky view. We didn't talk about how to get a death certificate changed, how to, add on a child, or when you have to report that a child is no longer at school, and all the other little tiny details. That's what a VSO is for. They know those details. They know, oh, you got a letter from the VA that says, oh, your child turned 18, we're dropping him off your case. They know what form you have to send in to get it fixed, to put your child back on, because they haven't graduated high school yet. So get your VSO. That's the best advice I can give you. Get your VSO. But in the meantime, I'm happy to send you the tools. And then you can get a hold of me with questions. I can get you hooked up. Your transition is only what's today, but I can cover you for all the rest of the stuff down the road.
Well, this has been amazing. It's been one of the best talk I have in a while, and I can not say thank you enough for you being here. Um, I have 20,000 more questions, but so much time left. So, any last words that you want to add to the people that are listening?
Yes, please. If you're a veteran, and even if you applied to the VA years ago and they said maybe at that point you had too much income, or for a while there they were actually counting assets, and that included the value of your land, your house, and all sorts of stuff that was just absolutely ridiculous. And then they realized, okay, that was not fair. So if you've been denied previously from the VA as far as applying to the VA and getting into the healthcare system, please apply again. But please do it through your VSO so that you can get all the stuff and all the knowledge and the paperwork, and they have a record of you so that when you do show up in the newspaper as an obituary, they know to reach out to your family. And then, so again, get back into the VA healthcare system if you can. Depending on where and when you served, they're going to look for different health conditions than your civilian doctor does at your annual physical. If all you do is go in once a year to use the VA's physical, do that. It keeps your foot in the door. It allows you to ask for hearing aids that you're going to pay $100 or maybe nothing for. And it allows you to be covered in the event of a catastrophic illness or injury out in the civilian world and you have to go to a local hospital. And then get the information on your VA healthcare, get the information on all the other benefits, make sure your family is aware, and you'll be covered. There's no reason for a veteran to live below poverty or to pay for something that has anything to do with their military service as far as healthcare. So God bless you all, and thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Like my grandfather and my dad before me, you have earned these benefits. You earned them the hard way. Go use them.
And with that, let's say goodbye and thank you again.
Take care, Narika.